Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rechach Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone for teaching this truth. And peace and salutations to the Yakim out there kicking this word in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so. Now doing another video on the wild edible herbs series. And the first one we're focusing on today is going to be pineapple weed. Let me get that up here. Pineapple weed is actually related to chamomile, a sister plant to chamomile. So the flowers look a lot like chamomile. Doesn't have the petals. You're not going to mistake this plant for any other plant besides a chamomile, but those flowers without the petals and those leaves help it stand out. Habitat. Pineapple weed grows in almost all waste areas and sometime between sidewalk cracks. Pineapple weed is an amazing plant which seems to thrive in abused soils such as dirt, road, driveways, and other dry, sandy soil locations. Edible parts of the pineapple weed is flowers and the leaves that are tasty finger foods while hiking or tossed salads. Flowers can be dried out and crushed so that you can use them as a flour. As with chamomile, pineapple weed is a very good tea. Pineapple weed flowers may become bitter by the time that the plant blooms, but are still good to eat. So like it says there, it's a really good substitute for chamomile if you need a lot of that and you need it from the wild. Because after a good rain season in certain climates, I remember in Arizona this was growing like crazy. I'd had jars full of this stuff and was using it as chamomile. Worked great. Tastes good too. So here's some shots. Again, the biggest identifier is going to be that cone flower that looks like chamomile, just doesn't have the petals, and then that leaf. Actually, there's a good shot. You're not going to see any other plant that looks like this. They don't grow very tall. I think in the description there it said 30 centimeters. I only grabbed a few pictures of this because it's such a unique plant. And you'll know it once you see it. On to the next. I think we're doing, let's do plantain. And this is plantain. This is the weed plantain, not that fruit that looks like a banana. A few different varieties, but we're going to focus on the broadleaf plantain. Some shots here. That flower head is going to be a big identifier. The leaves, I'm going to get into that. There's a couple of varieties that I found that are common, and the leaves are different. So we'll get into that. First, the habitat can be found growing throughout Ontario and most of North America, as well as in Europe, Asia, and meadows, pastures, lawns. That's the biggest place I run into these things is lawns, especially in parks. Not so much front lawns. I think a lot of people might spray for them. I'm not sure why you don't see them much in people's lawns. These are really older lawns, roadsides, gardens, and waste places. Yeah, so if I go to the park, almost any park I go to, I'm guarantee I'm going to find plantain growing within the grass. It's such an abundant plant. As a matter of fact, this was in a neighborhood that has these little, almost park-like areas, very small, so lakeside. And I swear it was probably 1/3 of the grass was plantain. There are also some clover, and I remember seeing another edible plant in there. What was that? Clover, plantain. I don't remember what it was, but there's another one in there. Anyways, but plantain was the majority of that little grassy area, or besides the grass and all the other plants, 1/3. Edible parts of the plant, the entire plant. Young leaves can be eaten raw or cooked. They are somewhat bitter and tedious to prepare because it's generally preferable, but not always required, to remove the fibrous strands before use. Many people blanch the leaves in boiling water before using them in salads in order to make them more tender. Once blanched, plantain can be frozen, then used later in a saute, soup, or stews. Seeds can be eaten raw or cooked and can be tedious to harvest. I've never harvested the seeds because I really have no idea how to do that. That must be that tedious. I just go for the leaves because that's probably the most abundant part of the plant anyways. The leaves and the flowering stalks, but mostly the leaves. Anyhow, if you do decide to work with the seeds can be ground into a meal and mixed with flour. Dried leaves make a healthy herbal tea. We'll get into some shots here. So yeah, back to the leaves and how I said they could vary. So these leaves here, this version of the plant, this is what I run into most commonly here on the West Coast. Is that short leaf, rounded, a little curly, like crinkly. That's what it looks like in a lawn, essentially. Just kind of surrounded by the grass. You might not even notice it because you look on a field of grass, you just see grass. But if you look closely in lawns, you'll see bunches of plantain like this, and look at those flowers there. Oftentimes that flower will be mowed down because, it's on a lawn, so it gets mowed. But you'll see little bits of the flower poking out like that. And again, surrounded by grass. But then you have this variety of plantain. And this variety I'm not familiar with, but from doing my research on the photos, it seems like it might be pretty common, maybe on the East Coast or northern plant. And it doesn't look like you'll find this in lawns. So I didn't find any of this variety in a place that looked like a lawn. That kind of looks like a lawn, but not a thick grassy lawn. Here we have one just kind of standing by itself. Same with this one. This one looks like it's on a roadside. Looked pretty tall. Gosh, that might be up to 2 feet tall. It's really hard to say, but you might run into them looking like this. The big identifier, though, is just kind of the general structure of the plant. All the leaves growing out from that mass. They don't branch up. They don't grow on stems. The leaves come from the center of the plant, and that's about it. Same with the flowers. They're all growing out of that one center with no branching. It's going to be the biggest identifier there for you. And this is a very nutritious plant, very abundant. Like I said, if you go to a park, you're going to find this, typically you're going to find this just growing all over the place in a lawn. So, on to the next, we're going to go to purslane. Purslane is actually a succulent wild herb. So those leaves kind of have a thickness to them, and the branches, the stems on those leaves are actually it's all edible. This whole plant, if I remember correctly. I eat the branches and the leaves. I've never gone for the root. We'll get into the description here, but I know what's above ground is edible. Purslane is often found thriving in cracks of sidewalks, driveways, even during summer's heat. It often pops up in container gardens, flower beds, gardens, fields, waste ground, and roadsides. So the edible parts, leaves, stems, and the flower buds. So maybe not that root, but the above ground plant, there's a lot of it. So I actually have one growing in my backyard right now. It's just too much to deal with. I've had a little bit of it, but yeah, it's a very large purslane. It's growing next to my garden actually, so it got some of the water from the garden. It's growing like a monster. But there's those red stems, And then the leaves, that's going to be the biggest identifier, is those red stems. Sometimes they're greenish red. They're not that bright red. I don't think I have any good pictures of the greenish red stems. And that thicker succulent leaf. It's always growing along the ground, kind of creeping on the ground. It doesn't grow into like a bush. I mean, here it looks like it's doing that, but that's actually probably just a crack in pavement that it's growing out of. It won't grow maybe a few inches from the ground. Here you see it creeping along a sidewalk in the ground, and that's what you're going to typically find it doing in the cracks of the sidewalks and driveways, next to the sidewalks. Sometimes it has these yellow flowers on them. Not always, but you'll see them there often. And again, this is how you're going to find it growing, kind of like a little monster creeping along the ground. And they can get pretty big. Sometimes you'll see them growing up off the ground, but I mean, like I said, it's only just a few inches off the ground. It's typically just too heavy, being a succulent to want to raise up off the ground like that. So just be creeping along the ground. And this plant is actually high in omega-3 fatty acids. So the same thing you would get from fish. It's kind of got like a mucusy texture to it, but again, very nutritious, and in the right places, really abundant. This is one of my favorite because of its abundance and its nutritional factors. So that's it. Until the next time, I'm going to do a little bit more research and get some more plants and come back with another in the series. Until then, Shalom.